Good day and welcome to Conversations with AARP in the Virgin Islands. I'm Troy Deshabir Schuster, State Director of AARP in this territory. And today we want to discuss something that is so very important in families as people continue to live longer, to age, to strive to age in place in their own homes with the help of family caregivers and others. AARP and the National Alliance on Caring defines caregiving as the unpaid care provided by family, friends, spouses, and neighbors for their loved ones who may need short term or longer term help with everyday activities and tasks, even medical and nursing tasks. This can include housekeeping, meals, personal care like bathing or getting dressed, scheduling appointments, personal finances, medication management, wound care, and transportation. Today, 48 million family caregivers reside in the United States, representing one out of every five adults. Providing care and the need for caregivers is expected to increase as the population ages. But many family caregivers don't consider themselves as caregivers. Rather, they see themselves as sons, daughters, spouses, and friends supporting their loved ones. While their role offers a sense of purpose, many of these caregivers report physical, emotional, and financial strain. This scenario is often attributed to the challenges that family caregivers face while providing care to their loved ones. Recognizing the sacrifices of caregivers, AARP continues to strive to support them by providing resources to lessen the impact of caregiving on their health and wellness. And to this extent, we have with us a special guest today who is Dr. Migdalia Brathwaite, a clinical psychologist here in the Virgin Islands. Welcome, Dr. Brathwaite.
Hi, Troy. Thanks for having me today.
A pleasure. Thank you for being with us. And tell us just a little bit about your work as a clinical psychologist. Where do you work? What services do you provide in the community aside from what you're doing for AARP?
Yes, so the services that I provide is that I work with the Department of Health as the clinical supervisor. Right now, my main focus is on providing some outpatient support through the clubhouse, where we help people learn to facilitate their own caregiving and learning about how to organize their lives through a number of training opportunities every day. And so that is my main focus, in addition to doing some individual therapy.
So very important, especially as we face so many challenges in this very uncertain world today. Huh? I mean,
Yeah.
we're looking at political, financial, economic on the wider scale, looking at challenges of the pandemic. And I'm sure there's a great need for clinical psychologists like you to help to keep people centered and focused. Are you seeing more people come to your program during this period of the pandemic?
I am. So we have a number of people that come. We try to provide a wide scope of support. We're creating some virtual supports right now for people who still don't feel comfortable coming in for services. But we do see that. And, you know, at the end of the day, all of the work that we do with living, whether it's coming here to the clubhouse, whether it's getting individual support, it's all about caregiving of the self. And so caregiving is really at the core of everything that we do in life. And in the work that I've been doing with you, I've been referring to it as sort of as self-giving, because sometimes we forget the self in the whole process of caregiving.
Exactly. Research indicates that family caregivers are reporting that the care recipients have greater health and functional needs today as compared to 2015. This suggests that more Americans are providing increasingly complex support to their loved ones, despite the increasing need to provide complex care, often without access to services and support. They continue to
Mhm.
support their needs. This shift lends to the question, if family caregivers are providing this type of care to the care recipient, who is caring for the caregiver, right? Who is caring for the care?
Yes. Hmm.
And so, pursuant to that, you worked with us at AARP to develop a wonderful Caring for the Caregiver workshop. And
Yes.
that has already started, right? And
Yes. Yes.
you've already had 2 sessions, and I'm hearing that we have a nice level of participation, and it seems like people are really enjoying those workshops.
Yes, yeah. Yeah, it's been a really great experience to step in alongside people that are doing such noble and tender work. And at some point in the caregiving journey, there needs to be a focus on the one that is providing the support. Oftentimes people that are providing the caregiving can neglect themselves, trying so hard to be there for the care recipient. And so the work that we're doing together is really helping people to focus on either beginning the journey. So the first workshop that we did was called Who's Driving the Bus, because it was an opportunity to look at what it would be like if you're just thinking about about starting the caregiving journey, or if you have already started the caregiving journey, but you're right at the very beginning. In our first workshop, we had about half and half of people who were new in the journey and those who had been in it for at least 5 to 10 years. And it was an opportunity to really look at what are the stories, the narratives that are shaping the caregiving experience, or even the thought about going into the caregiving experience. So we looked at the big idea narratives, what we thought it would be, and we transitioned into looking at what the more personal narratives become after you start recognizing all of the elements that caregiving involves. And so we had an opportunity to look at that in our first class. And I do want to say this too, that all of the work that we're doing with the people that come to the class is broken into 2 areas. So there's the learning lab, where people are learning about the journey. And then there's a place for us, which is an actual experience of caregiving in the actual workshop. So people get to experience what it would feel like to care for themselves and some of the narratives and questions along the journey.
Before we move on in the conversation, I'm going to ask one of my support staff who's in the background to put up the information about registering for the Caring for the Caregiver workshops. If we can put that in the chat so that the listening and the viewing audience can pick that up. And we will talk about it also later on in the show, but just so people can have that number and address to call, and to go to on the web. If you will put that in our chat so that they can register for the Caring for the Caregiver workshops. We've already completed 2 sessions and we still have some more sessions ahead of us. So it's not too late to register. The sessions are all free of charge. They're all virtual. So you can view it on Zoom video conferencing wherever you are in the comfort of your own home, wherever you may be. So please do register for those events. Now, talking about, again, who's driving the bus, what an
Yeah.
appropriate title, huh? Because oftentimes when we get involved in being a caregiver, it seems like we are no longer driving the bus, like our life
Right.
is no longer our own, huh? And
That's right.
so can you talk a little bit more to that? Like how do people, just very briefly, put themselves in the driver's seat when they're a caregiver?
Absolutely. And so that's the thing. It is really a process of recognizing some of the initial narratives that go through our minds when we start the journey. We talked about really looking at the moving from the role of either being a child or a spouse, a family, another family member, or even a friend, and transitioning from knowing ourselves in those roles and moving into embracing the role of being called a caregiver and what that really means. And so part of learning how to drive that bus is recognizing the identities that you're stepping into and what it means to be a caregiver and the kinds of things that it allows you to do on the behalf of the care recipient. And recognizing that even though you're expanding what your initial role was, that you're also allowing yourself to still be who you knew yourself to be, which took us into our next session, which was called Givometry, which was about after you're able to really understand how that role that you knew yourself to be in expands and shifts, getting into a place of looking for balance, because in the caregiving journey, one of the things that's very, very important is to recognize that there are all these triangles that you're doing with the person that you're providing support for. So you try things that your doctor says, or try things that that you've read online. You try preparing a care manual. There are all these things that we're trying, but we're leaving ourselves out of the equation of trying different options of helping ourselves in that process. And so that could take us sometimes to feeling squared, where we're either weary, lonely, where we're feeling overwhelmed. And we talked about how to manage yourself when you get into a squared space, and then ultimately getting to a place where you feel a sense of wholeness, or a sense of being circled by a new rhythm that works for the care recipient and for you as a caregiver. And you and I think at one point talked about the fact that providing care is a creative act. You always have to sort of be in the moment and think beyond a traditional way of providing support for the care recipient.
And I love that whole imagery of geometry. Being a
Yes.
mathematician myself, when I first read that word giveometry, I was like, wait, geometry, and then I had to look again. I was like, no, that's giveometry, and
Mm-hmm.
the triangles and the squares, and bring it all in a circle, and that
Yes.
completeness. That's marvelous. And by the way,
Mm-hmm.
before we continue on, now I have the information here for those who are listening on the radio or viewing on television. To register for the Caring for the Caregiver workshops, you may simply call 1-877-926-8300. Again, that's 877-926-8300. And it's very easy to register over the phone. The call center will give you all the information you need, and get you signed up for any of these caregiving workshops. Again, remember, it's free to the community. We only allow 30 individuals per session. So please do register early, because it does fill up quickly. We're finding that people are really enjoying these workshops and coming back over and over again, which is really marvelous. And so, moving forward, then, Dr. Brathwaite, to the next topic. Here you have the place for us, the
Yes.
wisdom of caregiver self-care, bringing
Yeah.
motherhood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So that's the one that we're coming into this week. And one of the really important tasks of being a caregiver is to recognize that there are 48 million people that are in the same situation as you. And so, what that constitutes is a place in the world, a literal space for people who are providing caregiving. And one of the things that I asked in Giveometry was, in the whole scope of caregiving, why is it that we aren't hearing more conversation about it? Why aren't we talking about it more? And that was a conversation that was very robust about um, the reasons that we think that we're not talking about it. And I think one of those reasons that people aren't willing to admit is that we're afraid of this part of our life experience. And so one of the things that we are going to be looking at in a place for us is different ways of providing self care for the caregiver. So I know that there's a lot of information out there that says go for walks, read books, exercise, make sure that you're drinking enough water, take care of yourself. While I think those things are standard, and we did touch on those things, and those are part of what I call the replenishments, there are other things. Sometimes caregivers have a difficult time with those that they're providing care for. And so maybe forgiveness might be an element that is a form of caregiving, or being able to recognize that while you're trying to care for yourself, you need to look at things like recognizing that you're not a superhuman person, that you're just an ordinary person trying to do this great task of helping someone's life to be as normal as it possibly can be in the process. And so, what that may mean is looking for ways to find creative moments for yourself. Like we talked about things like creating green space where you take the kinds of questions that come to you along the journey. Ask yourself, what is that question here to teach me? And things like assigning things or delegating things that were part of your life that you would have enjoyed before, but now you have to schedule time for it. Like even sitting down and looking at a funny video clip or something that uplifts you and delegating that out to a friend or family member as part of caring for you when you're not thinking about caring for yourself. So there's so many ways that we can work on trying to care for ourselves where it's just not all on your shoulders. The other thing that we talked about is creating an enjoyment plan, because it's very easy to forget the things that you enjoyed when your life is really centered around providing the kind of support that makes someone else's life feel as good as it can in a challenging time.
Just a moment ago, you pointed out that there are more than 48 million caregivers in the world, in the United States alone,
Yeah,
and the United States alone,
that's
and
right.
and why aren't people talking about it? And that's a really excellent question. Oftentimes, if we engage with a friend who happens to be a caregiver, we may hear them grumble that they're the only one taking care of their loved one. They aren't getting help from their siblings, and that's all very valid.
Yes,
It's a very difficult work, but there's so much more to being a caregiver. As you
yes,
said once to me in conversation, it's a very delicate work, right?
very.
A very delicate work being a caregiver, and a very delicate work teaching caregivers to care for themselves.
That's right.
The gripes and the complaints may come up, but underneath all of that is the suffering that we
Yes.
witness in our loved one as a caregiver, as we
Hmm.
see our loved one declining in health, right?
Yes.
And then it causes us as a caregiver to feel great pain. Huh? It's a
Yeah.
real burden to see your loved one, somebody you really love and care for, declining in health,
Hmm.
and and so many other issues that go along with that. And so
Hmm.
that's why it's important for us at AARP to work with wonderful people like you who care for the human emotion, the human psyche, to develop and to help to support these people. So we really encourage everybody who is a caregiver to come out and take part in these workshops. And
Yeah.
so the next topic here looks like, what's your who?
Yes. Yeah. So, what's your who is an interesting turn of phrase, but it's really important for people who have been in the caregiving journey for a long time and have created a rhythm in their lives for themselves and their care recipients. But there comes a time when the caregiving journey ends and the caregiver is at a place where they have to begin to think about their new who. Accepting the role of being a caregiver is a who in and of itself. But then once that has shifted, then you're still there. And so, how do you rejoin the world when oftentimes people that are providing care may be doing it full time or maybe working and doing it. And so their world revolves just around those two areas, at which creates a very full life. And so, what your who really is about transitioning into creating new roles, looking at death and dying, and reintegrating yourself into a space where you're writing a new story for your own life. And that can be a challenging step, especially when there's been so much effort put into the caregiver's life and well being. And so that's why things like these workshops that we're doing are really important, because it doesn't leave you out along the way. And so when you're still remembering that there's a you involved in the caregiving journey, then when that time comes and you're going through sort of the normal
Um, I think we have lost Dr. Brathwaite for a moment here, and hopefully she'll be able to rejoin us. We have internet challenges, but it looks like she's back. Okay, I see her moving again. Here we are. Sorry,
Yes.
continue, Dr. Brathwaite.
Yeah. So I was just saying that, you know, What's Your Who is really about integrating, reintegrating back into your community and in your world in a very different way. Um, really looking towards writing those brave new stories for your own life. And it is a brave new story to now look at yourself outside of that role that may have been difficult to step into, of being the caregiver. And now you're having to focus on caring for yourself, which is why I was sharing that it's really important that in these classes, in these workshops that we're doing, we're always focused on some level of caregiving along the way. Because if you forget yourself in the task, in the work of caregiving, which is a very tender and gentle work, then you have to rediscover who you are. And as you said before, therapy is really one way to get yourself back into a space where you can reconnect with yourself and your needs. But in addition to that, there's a lot of work that is needed outside of that 50-minute session. And so, what we're doing is trying to give people some tips and some exercises to do that would help with moving towards certainly this ultimate journey of learning what your who is again after the caregiving journey has ended.
And it's interesting that you have this topic included because even before I saw your plan for the workshops, one day I thought to myself, because I am my mother's caregiver, I spent a lot
Hmm.
of time with her and I planned my days around her. I pretty much planned my life around her,
Yeah.
managing all of her meals, managing her paid caregivers, helping my sister with the management of her healthcare,
Hmm.
but a lot of the hands-on, I'm right there with her. And
Yeah.
um, one day I looked from my home up the hill to her home, and I thought, when the Lord calls her home,
Hmm.
what am I going to do with myself?
Yeah. Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
how do I move on or restart my life after I've
Yeah.
spent years planning my life around her, and I enjoy doing it, love
Yes.
doing it. It's a great joy to help my mother,
Yes.
and hopefully she'll live for many more years. She's
Hmm.
88 years old this month
Mm.
and has a lot
Hmm.
more life in her. But again, what will I do with
Hmm.
myself when she
Right.
departs? And that's an
Yeah.
interesting question.
It is. And, one of the things that I encourage people to do is to create sort of a victory log. So every day isn't always going to be a slam dunk and a home run in terms of how you provide the caregiving. But there are those days when you can really open up your thoughts and say, hey, today was a good day. It was the best day of the week. And so what I encourage people to do is either pull out your cell phone and record yourself, reminding yourself of how good the day was and what you did, maybe even taking a picture of some of the things that you did that day or even a video log. And so when that role is over, um, this is something that you could look back on and remind yourself that effort was put into creating a safe and as comfortable as possible of a space for someone else. And those skills are still in you to be able to write your own brave new stories outside of that new role. And so that's one thing that people can consider doing as they move forward in that journey, just creating a memory and victory log.
That's a beautiful idea. I like that a lot. I'm going to meditate on that and work toward that.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And, another friend of mine who has been a caregiver, who had
Mhm.
been a caregiver to her mother's no longer with us, told me that you should take a lot of pictures,
Yeah.
and remember every moment and
Yeah.
create wonderful memories that you can hold on
Hmm.
to so that those even help you to move forward with life afterward.
That's right.
And so again, for all of our listening audience, we're talking about the Caring for the Caregiver workshops hosted by AARP and presented by Dr. Migdalia Brathwaite, a local clinical psychologist right here in the Virgin Islands, right on St. Croix, who is very sensitive and very much e- embroiled, if I'm gonna use that term, part of our culture, who really understands all of the cultural nuances of living here and being a caregiver here. So please do register for these caring for the caregiver workshops. Please do join us. They're free of charge. You do have to register. Each workshop is a standalone session, and so you can register for any one or the remaining two. And you can do so by calling 1-877 926 8300. Again, 877-926-8300 to register for those caring for the caregiver workshops. And so we have just a couple of minutes left. So, Dr. Brathwaite, any other thoughts on your experience with us in these caregiving workshops?
Yeah, I really want to talk about the last part of it because we spent a lot of time talking about what we do in the beginning. And there are other things that we do. Really, they were designed for people to have an experience. There's a lot of information out there online, but there are not a lot of experiences out there online that people can have as a group. So the goal for all of the workshops was and is to create caregiving tribes because we need people to connect with us who understand what the journey is like. So that's the first thing. But the second thing is that we need to remember that there are things that we can just add into the grand scheme of the work that we're doing. And so that's what the second part of it is. We have Heart to Heart, where we bring someone who has gone through the caregiving journey that shares what they've done, how they've gone through, what they're doing. And we also provide an opportunity for people that are there to ask questions. And then we move into our carefree space. And our carefree space is where Miss Kanuma Simmons of SOCA uh, provides an opportunity for people to learn how to incorporate movement into their everyday activities that helps them to recognize that even while you're providing the caregiving, you can still take care of yourself. And then we end with a breathing exercise to remind us if there's nothing else that you can reach for, you can reach for your own breath and energize your mind and your heart.
Exactly. Wonderful, wonderful. So thank you so much, Dr. Brathwaite, for all that you do for our community, for all you do for AARP, and for all that you do for the many caregivers in our community who are providing a very important service for their loved ones, the care recipients, and by so doing, creating a much more livable community here in the Virgin Islands. So again, thank you so much. And we hope that all of our listening audience, if you're a caregiver, that you will take advantage of our Caring for the Caregiver workshops at AARP. Thank you so much for joining us and have a great day.